welcome to our webinar. So to introduce our guests, both guests are hosts of RunnersFM, a very famous podcast for running. We just talked before, and they have around 3,000 frequent listeners, now also starting on YouTube. So if you're interested in running, please look at RunnersFM, really interesting topics. Frey is more of a I don't know if that's the right word, but a beginner in running. He started his running journey only 3 years ago, but is already a 2:26 marathon runner. So that's very, very fast. And that's a little bit of a fun fact. He's not a full-time athlete. He's working in a family business selling German kitchen. And Victor is a professional runner. He also works part-time as a coach, and just locked in his best time in a half marathon in under 65 minutes, and in the future is more focusing on long distance running. Myself, I'm the co-founder of MNSTRY. I'm actually a nutrition scientist from the TU Munich, and now work beside my job at MNSTRY, creating new products as a lecturer at the DHGS, that's a private university focusing on sports science. And I have been working in professional cycling, and myself, I'm more of a cyclist, but also as a kid started with track and field, and running was always a hobby, and I'm still running like twice a week. Okay, our topic today is what is bicarbonate? You also see the two products we have, the capsules and also the gel. We will talk about that later. How does bicarbonate work? What does it do? How does it work, especially in running? Why should you use it, or maybe why you should not use it? And then you can always post your questions in the comment section, and we can discuss. And I will always try to maybe pick up the questions already, either after we finish the presentation, or maybe if it fits also in between. So to start off, maybe first some science facts about bicarbonate. So bicarbonate is part of sodium or potassium bicarbonate and acts in our metabolism as a strong base. Maybe you know it from actually in your kitchen. It can be used also as a cleaning tool in kitchen, but the pure powder is different to encapsulated bicarbonate, because bicarbonate in pure form, like you know it for kitchen use, reacts with the stomach acid, builds gas, and that has always been a problem digestive-wise. So that's why newer formulation, like our encapsulated bicarbonate, passes the stomach acid and is released in the gut, and is not causing digestive problems. What is important, that both form works, sodium and potassium bicarbonate, but you can neither ingest a lot of potassium, that would cause problems, and rather you would ingest more sodium, but be aware that with bicarbonate also comes a lot of sodium. So if you ingest a typical dose that is effective for our purposes, that we will cover in a second, you also ingest around 3 heaped teaspoons of table salt. So just be aware that it is a high amount of sodium. And what is super interesting is that bicarbonate actually really works. It's a very efficient supplement and is considered one of the 5 dietary supplements that consistently improves performance in elite athletes. The other 4 supplements are creatine, is probably more interesting in strength sports, is caffeine, that is widely used and a really efficient, or can be a really efficient supplement, maybe something we can cover in a different podcast. Also, just a short note that we are, you can also find short podcasts under the name Unlocking Performance that will cover different topics from nutrition science. And I just, for example, recorded the caffeine one that will be released soon. So caffeine, creatine, then we have beta-alanine. Beta-alanine works kind of similar to bicarbonate. It's a strong buffer and comes with a loading phase, so it's not as practical as bicarbonate, but actually also works well. And the last one would be nitrates, but they are probably more interesting for recreational athletes and not elite athletes. So those are the 5 supplements that the International Olympic Committee of Sports Nutrition recommends as efficient supplements. So how does bicarbonate work? That's super interesting. Everybody knows that when you work out and you do intervals or you are in short races, then lactic acid is produced. And with lactic acid comes H plus ions. So lactic acid is, out of lactic acid, there is lactate and H plus ions. Lactate actually works as a base and also as an energy substrate. And the H plus ions make you feel the burn in your muscles and the fatigue will set in. You can buffer this H plus ions with different systems. One of them being hydrogen carbonate. So the hydrogen carbonate or bicarbonate reacts with the H plus ions, builds carbonic acid, and this carbonic acid is quickly dissolved in water and carbon dioxide, CO2, and those can be metabolized easily. Therefore, the intake of bicarbonate with a loading and maybe a top-up intake increases the buffer capacity in the blood and prevents excessive acid buildup and therefore the pH reduction. So keeps the pH in your muscle tissues in a normal range. In detail, there's a good overview, and in the end you can also check the studies if you're interested. So what do the H plus or the accumulation of hydrogen ions do? They can reduce the intramuscular pH. They can even impair the activity of glycolytic enzymes and therefore the ATP production. They can inhibit the calcium binding in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. That's like a shell around muscle cells, and therefore accelerate the onset of fatigue. Bicarbonate works as an extracellular buffer, but indirectly also acts as an intracellular buffer because it triggers the efflux of H plus ions from the intra to the extracellular milieu. We don't actually know precisely how much exogenous bicarbonate is used up with intensive exercise. Of course, when you have lots of sprints and super high intensity and exercise, short accelerations, VO2 max intervals, you produce a lot of H plus ions, and the bicarbonate is kind of being used up, so it doesn't work forever. But the half-time is rather long, so you can expect a rather long effectiveness. So after the intake and the onset of the effectiveness, you can expect somewhere between, I would say, 1.5 and 4 hours of effect of bicarbonate. If you use it up quicker, or if you want to have it work for a longer time than 2.5, 3.5, 4 hours, we don't exactly know how long it works, then you can add a top up, for example, with a bicarb gel, and add another 5 grams of bicarbonate, and this will kick in quickly or after around 40 minutes and helps with buffering the H plus ions. So my first question, maybe to Victor, what is your experience? Have you tried it? Have you used it? How did you use it? What's your yeah, what's your experience using bicarbonate? You're muted.
Sorry for that. I've been using it quite a lot. I have to say, the latest 2 years, maybe. I think it started to be a bit hyped, maybe 2 years ago, especially here in Sweden, we're among the 800-meter runners, and there also a guy that you probably know about, Andreas Almgren, who's one of the best runners in the world right now, were using it. So that caught my attention because I'm always interested in products that can give that a little extra percent. So I started to use it 2 years ago. The first time I used it was before a 1500-meter indoor race. I'm not really a 1500-meter runner. I'm more of a slow twitch fiber guy. And I ran I think it was a 3 seconds PB that race, which is it's pretty good, like 3:52 I think it was. But the sensation during that race was very, very crazy, because I opened up my current PB pace, and I hadn't done any 1500-meter training. So I thought I was maybe a little bit optimistic to open up in that pace. But then it started to I never got that really, like the acidity kind of feeling in my legs ever. So I picked up the pace a lot the last 3 laps. So the last 600-meter, because it was an indoor race. And I got myself a new PB. And that was the first time I really used the product. And it was a pretty crazy feeling, I have to say.
Cool. So we see a typical use case for bicarbonate. So we from scientific reviews, we know that bicarbonate works especially in effort times between 30 seconds and 10 or 12 minutes, and is we can expect a 2 to 3% performance increase. I think we would have to calculate if this translates in your 3 seconds faster time, but could actually be somewhere between 2% and 3%. And it has been studied for a long time. We see here the first study that I found, like talking about bicarbonate in a sport context, goes back to the 1930s. This was the first study, and since then, a lot of research and experimentation have been conducted regarding dosage and administration. Like I already said, we can expect a 2 to 3% performance increase, especially in those shorter duration events between, like I said, 30 seconds and 10 or 12 minutes. And what we see here from studies, that we can expect a delayed muscle fatigue during intense exercise. We can expect a prolonged performance at maximum exertion. We can, due to more stable pH levels through buffering of the H+ ions, a longer maintenance of muscle contraction and functionality. And what is also interesting and really a factor also for multi-day events, maybe also in training, we can talk about this later, that neutralizing H+ ions promotes a faster return of pH to normal levels and accelerating recovery after intense exercise. Frey, have you had experience with bicarbonate yet?
Yeah, I've had. I'm more of a marathon runner, but I do feel during I do run shorter distances as well, and I do feel that it gives me a small but a noticeable edge during those races. It's not a super dramatic difference, but I do feel that I can tolerate discomfort better and hold my pace a little bit longer. But with that said, one of the biggest challenges for me, at least, has been the GI side effects. So I've had some stomach issues. So I really had to find the right dosage, and the timing has been really important. So what I'm doing and what has worked best for me is splitting up the dose into smaller portions, and then taking it with plenty of water, sometimes even along with a small meal. That seems to reduce the risk, for me at least, of stomach issues. And I've also found that taking something like Imodium beforehand has also helped me manage those side effects.
Okay, maybe we can dive into the how to apply it. Back to that. Yeah, I come. Maybe I start with this and then go back to the other slides. So Frey already mentioned that he expects or has been experiencing GI issues taking bicarbonate ahead of a workout or a race. So what we know that a co-ingestion with water and also small meals, carbohydrate meals or carbohydrate-dense small meals, reduce the occurrence of GI symptoms. You need a lot of bicarbonate to be effective. So you need somewhere in between 0.2 up to 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight, somewhere between 1 and 3 hours before exercise. It is important to know that the highest level of bicarbonate in the blood is quite individual. So for some, it is released quicker, and it probably takes only 90 minutes to peak. For others, it takes longer and it might take 3 hours to peak. But it lasts for quite a long time. So I would rather take it too early than too late. If you want it to be effective for a long time, for instance, for more than 3 or 4 hours, then during intense exercise or in race situations that take a long time, for example, also for like planned attacks or so in a long race, then it's a good idea to top it up, like I said, with a bicarbonate gel, because the effect won't last forever. What is very important, that is the sodium intake should be watched. So it's a good idea to make the meals, if taking bicarbonate on that day, quite low. And also, if using sports nutrition products, make those sports nutrition products rather low in sodium. So for example, if we're using gels, we have gels in our range that are low sodium, and also don't use the heat products that are high in sodium. That would be a good idea. And more is not better. So 0.3 grams per kilogram is absolutely the upper limit. More doesn't help more, but you need a certain amount, at least 0.2, to feel the effects. There also have been studies experiencing or covering or investigating the co-ingestion with other supplements like ketones or caffeine or creatine. And what actually worked was the combination with beta-alanine. I cannot really say if it worked better, because the one is a more of an intracellular buffer, beta-alanine, the other is an extracellular buffer, but we just heard that also bicarbonate helps on the intracellular level. So a co-ingestion is possible, but like I said, beta-alanine you need to load up for a long time, for at least a month or a few weeks. And it comes with tingling of your skin, so not everyone likes that feeling, and therefore sodium bicarbonate becomes more and more popular. Have you guys used beta-alanine before? Have you tried it, Victor?
Yeah, I'm actually buffering beta-alanine before all of my, so to say, A goal races. I've done that the latest 2 years, I think now. And I ran a PB 2 years ago, was the first time I started to do it. So I think for now it's hard to not do it. But I have to say, exactly as you say, Robert, my kind of best race now so far this year has been pacing one of the guys that I'm coaching, Ben Felton. it's got a pretty big social platforms, or like running platforms, YouTube and Instagram, and he ran a really good race in Barcelona half marathon in February, and I was pacing him for a sub 65. He ran 65:22, I think, but he was very strong race, 1 minute PB. But yeah, the moral of the story for me before that race, I had done beta alanine in the buffer for 2 weeks before that race, and I took or was it 0.2 grams of bicarb 3 hours before the race, together with caffeine, and a broccoli shot from that is pretty trendy right now. And I think that combination made me feel probably the best I've felt for a long time for that half marathon, locking in that 305 per 305 pace per kilometer was, yeah, I never felt easier. So I think that for me is definitely a recipe that I'm going to use for 10K and half marathons in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned also, like we already discussed, a supplement that is definitely effective, or maybe one of the most effective supplements is caffeine. Yeah, together with bicarbonate, maybe beta-alanine. The one that you mentioned, the broccoli sprout, is not so well researched yet, but is growing evidence that it might help. It comes as like a, yeah, it's a natural lactic acid reducer. Yeah, future will show how it will develop. But you mentioned 3 effective supplements from the list of 5 that are definitely working, and it's no wonder that yeah, that it helps. Let's go back to the presentation. So what does bicarbonate do in the long term? And I think here it's getting super interesting. I, for myself, I'm more of a cyclist, but I try every product, of course, myself in training. And I found out that I do not use bicarbonate so much in racing, because maybe the racing profile doesn't also match the bicarbonate usage. But also we discussed that in our scientific circle, that it's very interesting to use it in training. And I think this could also be a very important factor when you race, for example, marathon, where you don't reach the super high H+ ion concentrations in your blood, but you could still use it to improve adaptions in training, for example, in hard VO2 max intervals, or any time that you increase the lactate production and the H+ ion production through training, then bicarbonate can make you increase the training intensity, maybe prolong the VO2 max interval time. And one study that is super interesting showed a greater PGC1 alpha expression measured 3 hours after completion of a workout. And with bicarb, you see it here in the picture, the production was a lot higher, speaking for an increased mitochondrial production. And that is super interesting, also talking about adaptation and just better overall performance, more efficient energy utilization, and better recovery. I think we all know that VO2 max is one of the best predictor of endurance performance. And we discussed it last week in our first bicarb webinar with triathlon, or concerning triathlon. CB Kienle, and a former Hawaii Ironman winner, said if he used bicarbonate before ending his career, when he was already in his later stage of the career, when he was around 35 years old, if he knew how to use it, he for sure would have improved his performance just by keeping his VO2 max steady on a high level. Because we all know that with more age or later in your career, VO2 max is a thing. It drops from year to year the older you get, and you have to work hard to keep it up. And this could have been one way for him to keep his VO2 max high. So also interesting for athletes in training that might not be profiting so much from bicarbonate usage in the race itself. Okay, here again, it can be used in training to improve adaptations and possibly improve overall performance. There's one interesting study that I read a few weeks ago from Brazil. They also measured some effect that were not super significant, but some effect also at lower intensities, around 2 millimoles, and very good effects at 4 millimoles, where you don't have a super high H+ ion production yet. But this is also interesting that maybe the future will show that also with lower intensity training, or maybe with not super high intensity racing formats like half marathons or marathon running, even there we can see improved performances if using bicarbonate. Still in marathons, it could be used for a late attack or a finishing sprint, or a very fast last 500 meters or 1000 meters. So it all depends, I think, how you approach the race, how is your tactics. But for sure, if you're not using it in a race, it can for sure be used in training to improve adaptation. Okay, we talked about the protocol. Victor, maybe you can give us a short insight. We discussed this before. You tried it taking it in 2 doses, but you also tried it taking it in 1 dose. How's your experience concerning this?
Yeah, I think, as I said 2 years ago, when I think it will start to be very talked about, bicarbonate, I think it was a protocol on social media that was the most kind of used one, and that was exactly as what that on the last slide that you had here, Robert, like 0.2 to 0.3 grams per kilo of body weight. So I used that protocol, and that protocol said that that you should take half of that dose 1 hour before the race, and half of it 2 hours before the race. So for me, it was 20 grams of bicarbonate, and I took 10 2 hours before and 10 1 hour before. That was the protocol I used for like all of my races, kind of leading up all the way to the race I just told you about, the Barcelona race, where I looked into another protocol that one of my followers said could be beneficial for me and the type of runner I am. And that protocol was a little less aggressive, with 0.2 grams of bicarbonate. So instead of 20, I took 13, and I took it all 3 hours before the race in Barcelona. And as I mentioned before, that is probably the best feeling I've had in a half marathon so far in my career. So I think maybe he was right, my friend there, Marcus, that said it to me, that's something that I could look into. So I've used 2 protocols, but I think the latest one seems promising.
Okay. You mentioned before that you use a different strategy, splitting it up more because of GI problems. Can you share that with us, how you did it exactly?
So it's very similar to the first protocol that Victor mentioned. I do split it up in 2 portions. So I take 24 grams in total, but I split it up into two portions. So 12 grams 2.5 hours before the race, and then 12 grams 1.5 hours before the race. And I think by adding a smaller meal to maybe one of them, the first intake 2.5 hours before, I feel much less GI issues.
Okay. Okay, maybe I can share also one experience I made in the last weeks. This is also a topic you kind of need to find out when the level of bicarbonate peaks in your blood. And I have seen a lot of numbers from athletes. Some peak after 60 minutes, others peak after 3 hours. And it's not that easy to find out. I mean, you can find out by measuring it in the blood. do a blood gas analysis, but that is not available for everyone. And the one thing I did that is also mentioned here in the second topic here in phase 2, according to Australian Institute of Sport, that is a common strategy to approach supplemental use, and in this case, bicarbonate use. First, you would just find out, is it necessary? Does it work for me? Is this potentially beneficial or maybe riskful for me? Should I use it? I mean, I give you one example. If you're a recreational runner, just running for health, running in easy pace 3 or 4 times a week, probably bicarbonate is not the right supplement for you. If you are looking for better performances, preparing for a race, doing high intensity interval training, then probably it can be beneficial for you. Maybe it's also a good phase to find out which supplements make sense. We mentioned the 5 that probably make sense, and for runners, it probably would just be 3 or 4 in this case. I would not definitely recommend using creatine for a long distance runner. So you can find out what supplements maybe do not make sense and really make the list of supplements as small as possible, and focus on real performance enhancing things like the supplements we mentioned, like proper carbohydrate in training and in racing, good food, lots of sleep, and other techniques that help performance. What we also know that we still have not so many information for female athletes, like unfortunately with most of studies done in sports science, female athletes are not regularly or not so much tested like male athletes, and we still need to find out the how does it work in your menstrual cycle, how does it work when you use contraceptives. So we don't know really, and therefore like try out in training is very important also for female athletes. Second phase, like I did, for example, a few weeks ago, is to find out how does it work isolated when you do not train. I actually also did train. That would be the third phase. How does your stomach react when you take the recommended dose of 0.2 to 0.3 grams per kilogram? How does nutrition timing and fluid affect uptake? How does it feel? I think that's really important to try out. And then the next phase would be to try it in training. That's what I did, for example. So referring to a recommendation of a scientist, he said, okay, if you want to find out when the bicarbonate individually peaks, then take one big dosage of, like you said, Victor, 0.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, for example, and start your intervals maybe a little bit earlier, and you can feel the difference maybe in the third or fourth interval when it kicks in. Then look at your clock or at your watch or at your, in my case, it was a bike computer, and then you can see, okay, I took it at 9:15 and it started working at 11:30. So for me, it peaks after 2 hours and 15 minutes. In the future, I know, okay, if I take it too late, then maybe the race is already over or the training is already over when I want bicarbonate to be effective. And the last phase is gathering all those information and then use it in racing. Maybe first try it in a lower or less important race to see how your body handles it when you really are racing and going to the limit. But then you can establish a good strategy for yourself. What supplements to use, using bicarbonate, yes or no, and how to use it and when to use it and how much also. I would always start with a lower dose, like for example, 0.2 gram per kilogram of body weight, and then maybe try in training to go higher and see how your body reacts. Have you heard from other athletes using it? What we hear, Victor, what you hear in the media is that some famous Norwegian middle distance runners use it or started using it a few years ago, and also broke some records with it. Is that true, or have you heard about it?
I don't really know. I haven't heard so much about the Norwegians, but I definitely know that the Swedish runners, Andreas Almgren, as I mentioned Andreas Kramer, 800-meter runner, Swedish best 800-meter runner in historically. They're definitely use it a lot. And yeah, I would think that it's not many 800-meter runners that are not using it these days. But Andreas swear by it. I know that he's getting better using it, and I've seen some crazy high lactate numbers from crazy sessions that he have done with when he's using the bicarb. So it's definitely working for him, the buffering effect.
You also mentioned before that you used it in training when you had like a really intensive workout block. Maybe you can share what you experienced here also concerning lactate numbers.
Yeah, definitely. I can give you a little bit of a historical, like, what do you call it? Like, I can just say that I'm not very good with producing a lot of lactate. I'm more of a slow twitch runner, probably more of a marathon type of runner. I've done a lab test where I've been going from easy to all in, like the last 4 minutes were the last, like, I couldn't go faster than that, and I produced 5.2 with the last stage, which is not very impressive according to my coach Matt. But for this session, when I used bicarb, it was 4 times 2,000 meters with and plus all in 1,000 meter after those 4 times 2,000 meters, with just 60 seconds recovery between the sets. So the 2,000 meters were in 10K race pace, and the last 1,000 meter was as fast as I could run. And the lactate after that 1,000 meter was 22.5 with the bicarb. So that's clearly some kind of effect there, because I would never be able to produce 22.5 without bicarb.
Yeah, what happens in the metabolism, like we also learned before, your body produces lactic acid. This is dissolved in lactate and H+ ions. So we cannot measure the H+ ions, but we can measure the lactate. And by buffering H+ ions, you actually can produce more lactate. The lactate level is higher, and this is what we experienced here in your example. So I think lactate always has been like the bad guy in sports science so far, but we more and more learn that lactate is actually useful. Like I said, it can be used as a energy substrate, and it can lead to more adaptations, like high lactate levels. You need to recover from it, but they can improve your adaptation. And the harder you can train, the more adaptation you can get in special sessions. And if you can recover from it quickly, it really helps your performance. So that's a very good example of bicarbonate usage. Okay, when not to use bicarbonate in running. I come from a cycling background, and weight is everything in cycling. So body weight is super important, especially for climbers, for cyclists that go on the grand tours and do lots of climbing. And 1 or 2 kilograms of a difference can make a huge difference, especially for example, in a long climb. It can make a difference of first or maybe 15th place, and can ruin your overall ambitions in a grand tour, for example. So you really have to think about this when you do multi-day racing. In running, probably it's less of a problem. Please correct me, Frey or Victor, because you typically do not have competitions that are Saturday, Sunday, and maybe even a third one. You typically have only one race per weekend or so, correct?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So I think your body can get rid of the possibly increased water levels in your body and therefore for running is probably less of a problem. But like I said, it can increase your body weight because your body just is probably increasing the volume, tries to dissolve the higher amounts of sodium. Your blood plasma is also increasing a little bit, what might actually be good on hot days. But in total, you have to watch especially the salt intake. So what we did in professional cycling is, for those days that we used bicarbonate, typically on classic days, that would be a one-day race where it's maybe less important, but for stage racing, we on those days that we used bicarbonate, we put the riders on a low sodium diet. So for example, they were not allowed is not correct, but we excluded most of the salt from the normal diet and watched all the sodium in the sports nutrition products to be as low as possible, just to not interfere with electrolyte balance in your body. Because like we said, 15 grams of table salt, or the equivalent of 15 grams of table salt, is a lot of salt. So this is maybe the one point that is important to take into consideration using bicarbonate. What is also important, that everyone that has like an impaired renal function should not use bicarbonate. Children and people under 18 are not advised to use bicarbonate, and also people that have hypertension or sodium-dependent hypertension should be careful using bicarbonate. Also, pregnant women should not use bicarbonate. We don't know yet how that might interfere with the whole metabolism, so that is not advised. Then you should see how it could actually help on very hot days, because you just improve your water volume in your body and you can sweat more and maybe cool your body better. So that is an interesting fact. But it's not really known individually how that works, in what time, how quickly you more or less increase your water levels in your body. So maybe for multi-day events it's interesting. For short running races, I wouldn't say that's a super important topic. So we will have to see how that in scientific research, how that will be rated in the future. But like I said, on hot days it could maybe help you. On cold days, for sure, watch the sodium intake in your diet. And you can find out in training. Some people gain 2 kilos from one-time usage of bicarbonate. Others don't gain any weight. So it's very individual. So it depends on how is your sweat rate, are you a salty sweater or not. So there's so many factors that come in the play here. Okay, I think we covered most of the topics. We covered the gastrointestinal discomfort. We covered the race tactics. Like I said, electrolyte imbalance. You also need other electrolytes, not just sodium, but sodium is the number one electrolyte that is lost in sweat. So salt is not bad in that context, but too much can be problematic. So watch the sodium intake in your diet. And like I said, for some people, it's just not advised to use high amounts of sodium. Do you have any questions, Frey, Victor? Is anything that we haven't covered yet?
I think I have one from a follower of RunnersFM that sent in a battery of questions to me before this seminar, but I feel like we have answered most of them. But it's actually regarding the MNSTRY products. So you have the gels, and we have the kind of pills.
Yes.
So his question was like, or the capsules. So like, is that the same? Can you replace the gel with? It's 5 grams of bicarbonate per gel. Is that the same thing as 5 capsules? Because every capsule is 1 gram. Is it more or less the same, or is it different juices for the products?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to use the gel instead of capsules, that's possible. The intended use case for the gel is a top-up thing. So, but if you, for example, want something that also includes carbohydrate, I mean, that's the obvious difference between the two products. The capsules are energy-free. The gel contains 1 unit in a 1:0.8 glucose to fructose ratio, 40 grams of carbohydrates. But if that fits well in your, for example, pre-race routine, if you want to have 40 grams of carbohydrates pre-race with bicarbonate, it's also possible to use it as a part of your loading strategy. 5 grams would not be enough for effective use. But if you, for example, want to combine it with capsules, maybe first dose could be just capsules, second dose could be the gel. That in principle is possible. Our idea was to establish a bicarbonate system with a combination of capsules and possibly the gel as a top up in training or long racing. So that was the initial idea. But in principle, it is possible also to use it pre-race as part of the preload strategy. I mean, sure, it's the same bicarbonate as bicarbonate. It's 5 grams either from capsules or from gels, doesn't matter. We have more questions here from the audience. For which running distances does bicarbonate make the most sense? I would say, like we said, we more and more see that also in longer distance racing, it could be interesting, especially if you want to do like planned attacks, or you want to do a sprint in the end, or maybe do a progressive pacing strategy. Then you can evaluate if it makes sense. Scientifically, it makes sense in all racing up to 12 minutes or so. So for elite runners would be the 3K, I guess. Maybe for the world best runners would be also the 5K. But in shorter running races up to 5 kilometers, it definitely makes the most sense. Less in like sprint racing, not for the 100 meters, but everything, I would say, over 100 meters up to 5 kilometer racing, in my point of view, makes the most sense. I would try it in training to increase or possibly increase the adaptation. And maybe if your race strategy includes surges or sprints in the end, then it could be interesting to use it also for longer distances. Here's another question. Does it make sense for ultra distance running? Logically, maybe not so much. But if you have, for example, for trail running, if you have long climbs or you want to make an attack on a certain point, for example, on an uphill, then you could use it strategically. And maybe, for example, use a lower dosage for the load up and then use a top up 40 to 60 minutes before that planned attack. Or you could even just use a few gels during the ultra distance leading up to the planned attack. So there's different use scenarios that can be possible. So it can make sense. Like I said, originally it is most effective in shorter distances up to 12 minutes or so. Any questions from your side? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I know it's a Swedish ultra runner. He had a Swedish record for 24 hours before, and I know that he has had a lot of problems during his latest race attempts with loss of salt. So I would guess that could be one of the solutions, maybe to squeeze in some of these bicarb gels to hire for just the intake of salt, I guess. Is that correct, Robert?
Yeah, so what we see in ultra distance events, cycling, running, whatever, that in hot conditions, salt plays an important role. There's some reviews, they were just released in 2025, that show that the longer the distance is, the more important sodium becomes. For distance or time or events that last below 3, 4 hours, sodium is not really a problem, because the sodium stored in our body is enough to cover those needs. Sodium can improve glucose absorption a little bit, so it's not a bad idea to have some sodium for those shorter events. 3, 4 hours, not really a short event, but in cycling terms or triathlon events, it's rather a shorter event. But for everything going over this, especially on very hot conditions, in heavy sweaters, in people who are salty sweaters, salt can become more relevant. And I mean, in ultra distance running, we sometimes talk about race times of 20 hours or so. So their salt can play an effect. And what we saw in the past, that just supplementing or just ingesting pure water and no electrolytes, and if you do that for a long time, and that can really bring a lot of problems. That came up in the, I guess it was in the 70s, when the big marathon, or maybe early 80s, when every big town had a marathon. Most of them are still there. And especially the slow runners that took 5 or 6 hours, and every 5 kilometers they drank a lot of water, and they didn't actually sweat that much. So that could possibly, and also happened in the past, lead to hyponatremia. So a lot of water in the body and not enough salt, and this can possess or bring many, many problems. So in special cases, long distance running, high fluid loss sodium can play a role, and then maybe this gel can be an option, and it comes with carbohydrates. It comes with bicarbonate, obviously, so it can in those special cases, it could be a use case for that as well. Yeah. What are the best? Here's another question. What are the best training sessions to try bicarbonate? I would try it if you have 1 or 2 high intensity sessions per week, that is maybe quite typical for especially middle distance running, then I would try it there, or start trying it there, and don't use it on easy days. It won't make a difference. It really helps only when you produce this lactate and the H+ ions. So I would use it in, like you gave a good example, 2,000, 1,000, maybe 400 meter intervals. There for sure it makes sense to use it. Another question here: what do encapsulated capsules, or what does encapsulated bicarbonate mean? Like I said, the first studies in bicarbonate go back to almost 100 years, and they used the normal powder. And that was the biggest problem with those studies, and also the use cases, because the powder reacts with the stomach acid and builds a lot of gas and can contribute to a lot of gastrointestinal discomfort. And the encapsulated bicarbonate in for example, our bicarb product passes the stomach acid, so the capsules are not broken up with the stomach acid, and they are slowly released in the intestines and then reach the blood. And it's maybe not as fast. That's why you should use it early enough to have an effect. But you can, have, or in best case, you have no stomach problems and no gut gastrointestinal discomfort. And I would say that most gastrointestinal issues are resolved with that. Like we heard, food with the capsules helps, water helps. And if you do all those steps, then gastrointestinal discomfort should be very rare. That's our experience. But if you use the pure powder, like has been done in the past, then for sure gastrointestinal discomfort is a relevant topic. Okay, let's check if do you have an example training session where I can test the bicarb effect? Yeah, I just said, let's say you have a typical track workout, 5 by 1500 meters. I just give an example of 5 by 1000 meters or something in that region, below 10 minutes per interval. Then try it, use it with the capsules, or try it with the capsules. Have a bigger carbohydrate meal, maybe 3.5 to 4 hours before. Afterwards, you would take maybe 60% of the recommended dosage of bicarbonate, and then maybe have a small snack. It could just be a carbohydrate drink, maybe 90 minutes before the start of that interval workout. And that could be something you could try out and see how you feel. Cool. Frey, any last question that came up, or anything that hasn't been covered yet?
Yeah, I'm curious to know, have you seen any mistakes that athletes make when using bicarbonate that we can maybe avoid in any way?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would not use it more than twice a week, just because of the high salt amount that you ingest with bicarbonate. And we cannot really solve that because there's, like I said, I mean, there is potassium bicarbonate, but high potassium amounts are also a problem in your body, or too high potassium amounts. I mean, in our gels, there's a combination of potassium and sodium bicarbonate, but only using potassium bicarbonate would not work. So I wouldn't use it more than once or twice a week. Second topic would be to use it too late and not have the desired effect. So if you use it, let's say 30 minutes before the start of the workout, I think for most people it is too late, and you will have maybe a good effect on recovery, but you won't feel a difference in the workout. And third point would be to use not enough or too much. Like I said, 5 grams or so will not have a big effect. You need at least, let's give an example of a 70 kilogram male runner. Then it would be at least 14 grams of sodium bicarbonate, translating to 14 capsules, or maybe a combination of, in this case, would be 9 capsules and 1 gel. That would be the least amount that you need to have an effect. Or on the other hand, using more than recommended, so more than 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. So in the range for this example would be between 14 and 21 grams in 1 or 2 or 3 doses. 3 doses also a possibility to split it up in 3 doses, but take it early enough, not too late, not too little, not too much. I think that's the most important topics here. And then there's, I think what we didn't mention yet, it's actually quite cheap. So it's a very interesting supplement to use also in the long term in training, for example, because it's not really expensive. Especially our capsules are quite convenient. Also, you can count the capsule. I know it's not so cool to take so many capsules, but it works. It's not expensive, and you can carry it everywhere in your sports bag, and there's not many side effects beside the sodium. I can only recommend it to try it in training. If it works for you, use it, but if not, it's also okay. It's just one example of an effective supplement. And I would also say, I mean, it's very interesting if you have already done a lot of things in a good way, like training principles, training frequency, nutrition, sleep, recovery. It's kind of supplements are always like the icing on the cake or the cherry on the cake, so that it can make a difference. But first, do the important things correct. If you don't train you can use as much bicarbonate as you want, you won't improve. So you need a training stimulus to have an effect. I mean, that's clear. And you will not be an elite runner when you train once a week. That's not enough. So you need the training to have the adaptations. You need to eat right, fuel correctly, sleep a lot when you train a lot. And yeah, then possibly when you have all those factors done in a good way, then supplements can make a small difference. I think that is maybe a good last word. I hope also to our listeners you liked what we covered. We will record this session and it will be available on YouTube. Please remember to look after the RunnersFM podcast. I think there's super interesting topics. Like you just said before, Victor, that you also are on YouTube now. You can say a word yourself if you want. And yeah, maybe that could be our last words for today.
Absolutely. You said it in a very good way, Robert, and we're very happy to take part of this discussion. Myself, at least, I think probably Frey agrees as well that our protocol with 1 hour and 2 hours and 1.5 and 2.5 hours before it's probably better to do a little bit earlier, as you said, with the capsules there. There can be up to 3 hours before they are working in the best way. So that was very, very nice to hear that the Barcelona protocol that I used is maybe the one that I'll continue to use. So I'm very happy to take part of this and get some good new knowledge.
Thank you, guys. Good luck for the upcoming projects and races. And have a nice evening, everyone. And talk soon.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
a lot. Talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.